Primitive man. Primitive man. Terrified by the phenomena which harried him. Hadn't necessarily to believe that a sublime had the direction of their operation. The human mind. The human mind, then too much in its infancy, to discover in nature's depth the laws of motion, found it simpler to fancy a motor in this nature, rather than to view nature as her own mover. And without considering that it would have to go to more trouble to define this master, rather than searching through nature the cause of what amazed him, he acknowledged this sovereign being and elaborated rituals to worship him. It has been asserted that belief in eternal punishment is necessary if human beings are to be kept in check. Tirelessly they fill our ears that even if it were a large fib, it would still have its advantages, as it would keep men browbeaten on the path of virtue. I dare say, to the contrary, it is only successful in rendering them insane, wicked, despondent, irritable. Daily experience gives us, does it not, plentiful and convincing proof of the slight effect the fear of punishment has upon those people who believe most staunchly in them. Where does one find more secret crimes committed than among priests and monks? Where does one find more secret crimes committed than among priests and monks? That is, those people who you would think were the most thoroughly penetrated with religious truth. If they who are instructed to rule over men had wisdom and virtue themselves, realities and not fantasies, it would enable them to govern better, but scoundrels, quacksalvers, ambitious ruffians, or low sneaks, the lawgivers, have ever found it easier to lull nations to sleep than to teach truths to the public. But the service it were possible to render humankind would have been to cut off the head of the first imbecile who took it into his head to speak of God to men. How much blood spared in the universe? I think it is only too obvious that under the conditions alleged to be necessary to salvation, we are far more likely to be damned than saved. So tell me then, is this your God so loudly vowed to justice to have placed his puny miserable masterpiece in such a position? If it comes out the fate of the greater share of mankind is to be eternally unhappy, an all-knowing God must have known this from the outset. Why then did the monster create us? God was under no obligation to do so, certainly not. And if he did so simply to push man into such a fate, it becomes the foulest of all crimes.
To elude the force of this argument, partisans of the dogma of eternal damnation affirm that the sore affliction of the reprobate is not arbitrary punishment on God's part. No, it's a natural consequence of sin and the natural order of things. Indeed, who told you so? If you claim this to be a teaching out of Scripture, you'll have an awkward time proving it. And if you manage to pass across a single passage which seems to go in your direction, oh, the length you will have to go to in order to convince me of the accuracy, holiness of these few lines, which seem to you as though they go in your direction.
Oh, miss. Sorry. Oh, miss. Answer. Would someone full of loving kindness plant in his garden a tree which produces delicious but poisonous fruit? And would he be content to warn his children not to eat thereof they die? Were he aware of such a tree growing in his garden, will not this thoughtful and wise father proceed without delay to chop it down? And all the more surely do so in the knowledge that from eating its dread fruit, his children must perish and precipitate all ensuing generations into irreparable misery. But God knows that man shall doom himself and his posterity if he bites into the apple. His wickedness does not stop short of arranging man's seduction. He does what God has pushed him into doing, what God has enabled him to do. And behold him now, fallen and cursed forever. I call this cruelty without parallel. if you insist upon having God as the basis for your religion, at least endeavour to compose a flawless God. If not, every right-thinking and decent person finding it a great deal simpler not to believe in God at all, rather than to acknowledge one so cruel, so inconsistent, so barbaric, as to have created man simply in order to sink him into perpetual misfortune, grief, and anguish. May I? For it is of infinitely greater importance to achieve happiness in this life, whereof we are sure, and to forego the joys offered us here and now for imaginary ones, of which we are not and cannot possibly have the faintest idea.
Ask a Christian. That is to say, an imbecile, because it belongs only to an imbecile to be a Christian. Ask them, what is the origin of the world? They will answer that it is God who created the universe. Ask them now what God is. They do not know. What it means to create a universe, they have no idea. Ask them about the origins of plagues, wars, droughts, famines, earthquakes. They will tell you that it is the wrath of God. But what can we do in the face of so many evils? They will answer with prayers, processions, offerings, sacrifices. But also, why heaven is angry with men? It's because men are mean. But why are they mean? It's because of their corrupt nature. But what is the cause of this corruption? It's because the first man, seduced by the first woman, ate an apple which his God had forbidden him to touch. But what made a woman so stupid? It's the devil! But who created the devil? It's God. But why did God create a devil meant to pervert the human race? Again, they reply they haven't got the faintest idea. Within this hypothesis, I ask whether the rule, the law, the will, whereby God supervises beings, is of the same nature as our mortal will and power. Whether in the same circumstances, God can want and not want. Whether the same thing can please and displease him. If this be so, his function is merely executive. He follows instructions and is no longer autonomous. He has no power of his own. If, on the other hand, God can change his sentiments and his will, I wish to know why he does so. Certainly he must have some motive for changing them. For God to outstrip us in wisdom. I'll go further. If God knows beforehand that he shall change his mind and his will, why then, since the Omnipotent can do anything, has he not arranged circumstances in order to obviate the need for this mutation? And if he doesn't know what's coming next, what kind of omniscient God it is who cannot foresee what he's going to have to do next? If God is not free, then he amounts to something like destiny or chance, which vows don't touch, nor prayers melt, nor sacrifices appease, and which you'd better hold in contempt forever, rather than beseech with such little success. But hold, They protest. Man has achieved the sublime awareness of his God. This in itself betokens of the immortality he dreams of. Oh, poor wretch. If thou hast some advantage over animals, how many are there advantages over thee? Art thou not susceptible to 100 times as many diseases and infirmities? Art thou not the victim of 100 times as many passions? And this slight advantage you accord him, is it so great as to warrant his proud notion that he is due to eternally outlive his four-footed brethren? O pitiful humanity! Look to what length of folly thou hast been urged by thine own inflated self-esteem. What person can possibly be absurd enough to the point of believing that man is free? I ask to begin with whether we are allowed to exercise any choice as to the clime we are born in. Who can be blind enough to the point of not seeing that our will, having nothing to do with our actions being determined for us, we are responsible for none of them? Is there really anything more extraordinary than this superiority to animals which humans arrogate to themselves? Ask them upon what basis their superiority rests. We have a soul. Oh, that's their silly response. Ask them what they mean by this word, soul. Oh, it's passing strange, a mystery. Stupid that they are. If all these problems are mysteries, they understand nothing about them. And if they understand nothing about them, how can they make an affirmative decision based upon the coexistence of what they are incapable of conceiving? I'll tell you that I'm not aware of having any soul. That I'm acquainted and feel nothing but my body. Which it is my body which feels, which judges, which thinks, which suffers, which enjoys. When I die, the human frame is no more than an inert mass, unable to produce those movements which, collectively, constituted its life. The dead body,
neither circulation, nor respiration, nor digestion, nor locution, nor intellection are any longer there. The puerile dogma of a hell is the fruit of the diseased imaginations of priests, that is, those personages who comprise the vilest and most mischievous class in society, who began by fabricating a dreary, disgusting god in their own image, in order for this loathsome dummy to repeat what sorted best with their own interests, and above all, which was most likely to procure them with whores or money, the sole objects ambitioned by that crew of social outcasts, which society would be wonderfully well advised to rid itself definitively. But picture in your own terms the frightful God you preach. He hath but one son, begot of some passing strange commerce. For as man doth fuck, so hath he willed that his Lord fucketh too. One perhaps imagines it is upon celestial rays, in the midst of an angelic cortege, within sight of the whole universe, that this angelic creature is going to appear. No. 'Tis upon the Jewish whore's breast. Behold the worthy extraction accorded this personage. Some doubtless services the smutty fellow renders the priests at the Temple of Jerusalem. Next, a 15 years' disappearance. Scarcely does he reappear that his raving begins. He says he is the Son of God, his father's peer. To this unholy alliance he joins another phantom, the Holy Ghost. The three personages, he says, must be but one. It is to save us one and all he has assumed a fleshly shape. During a ribald supper, the cheat transforms water into wine. In a dessert, he brings a few bandits, upon which he feeds some victuals previously hidden there. One of his cronies plays dead. The impostor resuscitates him. He then betakes himself to a mountain, where he performs this jugglery, which would cause the worst among our contemporary mountebanks to redden with shame. Then, having finally exhausted the patience of the magistrate with his seditious outbursts, he is put to death. He puts up with it. Monsieur his papa succors him not in the least. And there you have him, this scoundrel used like the last of the outlaws to whom he was such a fitting chief. After some time, he reappears. Women, children, bawl out, miracle! But nevertheless, in this town where such prodigies have just been wrought, no one seems to believe in this God at all. Not a single conversion is operated there. Better yet, so little worthy of transmission is the event that no historian alludes to it. Only this imposter's disciples think they have something to gain from the fraud. Men are pleased by any novelty. Wary of the emperor's despotism, the world agrees for a need for a change. The cheats are heard. They make very rapid progress. It is the story of every era. Soon, the altars of Mars and Venus are replaced with those of Jesus and Mary. The life of the impostor is published. The insipid fiction finds its dupes. He is attributed 100 things which never came into his head. Weird rites instituted under the rites of sacrament. The most idiotic one of them all is the one whereby a priest has, notwithstanding, with a few magical words, the power to bring God back in a morsel of bread. This same host assimilates, and God Almighty is lugged down to the bottom of the intestines, where he is speedily transmuted into the vilest excrements. But at its very birth, this shameful cult might have been utterly destroyed if one had employed against it the weapon it deserved. Contempt. Admittedly, we do not truly understand the connection, the progression, and the sequence of all causes. But let us beware of taking the universality of any belief for a title in its favor. There is not one form of idiocy, not one form of madness, which has not enjoyed a general currency and mode. So long as there are fools on earth, there will be gods. And so long as there are gods, there will be cults, a heaven, etc., etc. I say unto you, banish forever from your heart this doctrine, which is an insult to your reason alike. So let's be rid of these false alarms. Let's forever have done with the dogmas, the ceremonies, the rites of this abominable religion. We may declare it truthfully. Of all the religions edified by mankind, there is not one which has preeminence above the others, not one which is replete with fables, with lies, not one with the most glaring contradictions.
very conceiving of this infinitely disgusting phantom is, I must confess, the one wrong I am unable to forgive man. I pardon him all his eccentricities, all his whims. I sympathize with all his frailties. But I cannot forgive man for having himself wrought those religious chains which have so dreadfully hobbled him, and for having despicably crept forwards, eyes downcast, neck stretched forth, to receive this shameful colour of his own making. I find, moreover, that these divine laws have, for effect or design, to render human beings unsociable, intolerant, quarrelsome, unjust, and inhuman. Inhuman to all those who have not yet received the same revelations, nor the same ideas. Until those fatal ideas can no longer re-arise, man will know neither peace nor rest on earth. And the threat of religious strife will always be poised over our heads. For mortal man there is but one hell, and that is the folly and wickedness and spite of his fellows.
Nature, when she cast us into the world, created us free and atheist. Nothing is more immoral than nature. Never has she burdened us with interdictions or restraints. Manners and morals have never been promulgated by her. Destruction is the soil and light that renews her, and where she thrives. It is upon crime she subsists. It is through death she lives. A totally virtuous universe could not endure for a minute. The learned hand of nature brings order to birth out of chaos, and wanting chaos, nature must fail to attain anything. Such is the profound equilibrium which holdeth the stars aright in their courses. which suspendeth them in these huge oceans of void, which maketh them to move periodically and by rule. Be courageous. Resign to the order of a fate which decrees that you, along with everybody else, shall sink back into the crucible of nature, soon to emerge again in some other shape. For the fact is that nothing perishes in the womb of this Mother Nature. The elements composing us first decompose, then straightway recompose otherwise in other combinations. I am aware of no drawback in not having any belief at all.